And we are back with another great episode of the one and only The Sick Podcast Steeler Crazy. I am Jay York Football. As always, I am joined by my compadre, Mic'd Up Sports One. And again, we're going to be talking some X's and O's, some Steelers quarterback controversy, NFL draft, some of these prospects. We know our Sick Media team is over at the NFL Combine right now. So just very exciting times in the NFL and a lot of questions with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Shane, let's get to it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Aaron Smith shields. Flacco, Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
As you mentioned, the Steelers quarterback rumors circulating seem to be never ending right now. So it's a good thing that we have a quarterback guru and expert on today to help describe what good quarterback play looks like, because I'm not sure the Steelers had that towards the end of last year. That's for sure. So we're excited to welcome him on, learn a little bit about his program. It's none other than our guy, Alex Drayson. How are you, man?
Good, thanks. How are you guys?
Good.
Good. Yeah, we appreciate you joining us. And I think the first thing we want to talk about and let our viewers and listeners learn a little bit about is the Quarterback Academy. So how did this begin? What are you guys up to now? And just kind of give us a synopsis.
Yeah, I've been running this Drayson Institute for about 13 years now. I'm a former college football coach. I was an offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. My academic background's in sports psychology and sport biomechanics. But I got out of coaching teams, went into the private sector when I had my own kids and just needed some time to spend some time with them. But I've enjoyed doing it from the private side as well. And I basically get to spend my days breaking down football and coaching kids and then other coaching staffs, on a daily basis, which has been a ton of fun.
You raising your kids to be quarterbacks? I don't know if you have old enough.
Yeah, I got my 7-year-old. He played for his flag team. We don't have tackle where I am around here just yet. He's a first grader, but he had a good year. He was very excited to be the Chiefs this year. We do the NFL flag, so they got to pick the team. So he was excited to be the Chiefs because that's who everyone likes to watch on TV right now. And he's done a good job playing quarterback. He led us to our undefeated season this past year, so he's enjoyed it, and he's looking forward to tackle soon. My 4-year-old's not there yet, but when I ask him what he wants to do, he says he wants to be the thrower, so I go with that.
Nice. We'll be talking about them in the NFL draft prospect pool before you know it.
Hopefully not too soon.
I've heard it goes quick. Jordan, I know you can attest.
Yeah. So let's talk about Mike's going to get into some draft stuff later. Let's talk about the quarterback room for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, obviously both free agents. Draft coming up. Just kind of talk about, where you see them leaning towards. Obviously, Omar Khan kind of had his press conference. Just still a lot of question marks, a lot of rumors going around. Just kind of talk about where you see that headed.
Yeah, I mean, when I break down their quarterback play from last year, it was decent at times. I don't think it was great. The most recent game I watched, I think it was the Week 16 game I broke down last night between the Chiefs and the Steelers. And in watching Russell Wilson in that game, he looked like someone who wasn't always sure what he was seeing with post-snap movement. I think the Steelers are not a very aggressive team pre-snap. You see a lot of teams with a lot of motions and bunch and personnel packages, unusual formations, trying to put a lot of stress on defenses through formation and pre-snap movement and disguise. That's not really what the Steelers do. They're definitely much more of a post-snap team, call the play with deliberate intention and run it, which does put a decent amount of pressure on the quarterback post-snap to be able to read post-snap movement, disguises. And, just going through that Chiefs game, you could see a lot of times, that pick in the end zone early in the game was 100% on him. There were definitely some things where he wasn't recognizing rotations. And not to be fair, Spagnuolo was one of the best at it. I mean, I didn't give him an easy, game to break down last night, and they did it to a lot of teams. But for a guy who's 35, 36 years old, you kind of hope that he can win the game mentally post-snap. But I don't think that's necessarily where his skill set is. He throws a deep ball as good as anyone in the NFL still. He's got enough athleticism to matter. He definitely has tools to win. But I think when he's paired with a team that's going to have a limited pre-snap pressure on a defense. You're kind of putting him in where he's not using his best skill set. What you didn't see them doing a lot of was getting freebies. And what I mean by that is if you turn on like a Chiefs game, you see a lot of times where if it's 3-by-1 and the defense is out leveraged the 3-receiver side, they just catch through the bubble right now. The ball's out and it's a cheap completion for 6 yards. And Pat Mahomes throws it from a funny arm angle and stuff, and they just get it out there. That's not something you really see the Steelers taking advantage of. And I don't think that was really their MO. It wasn't what they were trying to do. It wasn't the plan. The plan was let's run the ball consistently. Let's, win from the play action package and then have a good drop back package to complement that. But I think the true drop back package was perhaps a little bit too big, and there wasn't enough formational and pre-snap pressure on a defense. And I think that put Russ at a bit of a detriment where guys like Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady would excel in those types of situations. That's not Russell's skill set. So
who would you go with?
Who would I go with?
What are your thoughts on Fields?
Yeah, so Justin Fields is actually one of the hardest breakdowns. I'll actually go back to when he was at Ohio State, when he was coming out of the draft, and I did like a profile on him. One of the hardest things to break down on a quarterback is how well he's processing the game. Like, how well is he taking in what he's looking at? So this was 2020 season, I believe. So it was that COVID year, and they were, backed up, starting the season late. And it was the very first game, and I think Ohio State was playing against, if I remember correctly, it was University of Minnesota. And they're running a mesh concept. And if you're from a quarterback room, that mesh is going to function pretty well against cover 1, 2, and 4. But cover 3, where you have a hook and a curl player to both sides, mesh is a 3-receiver concept, and you're running through 4 defenders. It's not going to work. So normally your 4th receiver on the outside is running what we would call an access speed, or like a curl or a comeback or something. So he's got a pre-snap cover 3 look, a post-snap cover 3 look, and he reads the mesh. And he's looking at it the whole way. He never comes off it. So the question becomes, is this an Ohio State thing where they taught simpler progressions? Is it they haven't gotten to that point? Is it a COVID problem where they didn't have a lot of meeting time in the offseason, or was he taught it and didn't recognize it? Now, to his credit, he didn't just throw the ball. He extended the play, scrambled, completed like a 40-yard off-schedule throw, and he ended up starting the game like 6 for 6 for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, but none of the throws had been on schedule. So with Justin Fields, the question was, he's obviously got talent and he's got A+ athleticism. Can he translate into understanding what you're trying to teach him? And some of that needs to come with continuity. Some of that needs to come with a great relationship with the offensive staff, quarterback coach, coordinator, head coach. And it doesn't look like he's really been able to establish that relationship, with someone yet. So you would hope that, a guy like Arthur Smith, who's entrenched into a situation, has a scheme, 2 or 3 years with one person would help him kind of develop some of that stuff. Now, he falls a little bit into Russell's category as well, where he's not necessarily a post-snap wizard like a Tom Brady. He's more of a let's put pressure on the defense pre-snap and then simplify the concept, because I have forced the defense either into rotate or don't rotate based on my motion or my package, or whatever the deal is. So he kind of falls in that same category. So, to be honest, I think either one of them would benefit from a second year with the same system. It's just whether or not the Steelers would be willing to do that at this point, if they're considering themselves to be a team that's constantly winning, but not quite reaching the levels that they want to reach.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah, quickly before we transition briefly to more college play, I want to get your thoughts on some of the other veterans. I'm sure these are obviously guys that you have watched for many years now. Guys like Stafford, Aaron Rodgers. We'll focus on those two specifically. How much do they have left in the tank?
I'd say both of them have a lot left in the tank. Rodgers is kind of the hot button, question on everyone, just because of how the relationship went with the Jets, and it didn't work out. Obviously, a torn Achilles at age 40 is going to do that to you. It was easy to see at the second half of the season he was way better than he was at the first half of the season, just physically. He could move better. He was planting off his back foot, pushing harder, throwing the ball with more velocity. He wasn't just relying on late play arm talent to bail him out of situations. He was definitely getting better as the season went on. And statistically, his season wasn't that bad. There were definitely times when the Jets offense was absolutely anemic, and there were times when it was his fault, no doubt about it. But there were times when he was fantastic too. So I definitely think he's got in the tank again. The second half of the season was promising for the team that wants to pick him up. Now, as some, again, if my educational background is biomechanics, anyone in this field or not could tell you that 12 months off an Achilles tear that's a tough ask. So it makes sense that it took him a couple of months to get going. That makes sense. Also, considering it had been 2 years since he'd actually played football, because he only played 4 snaps that season when he did tear the Achilles. That's in a new system with new players and stuff, and he'd missed an entire season development. So I think it's a little bit unfair to judge him just based off how the Jet situation went. He's obviously a Hall of Fame quarterback. By the end of the season, he was throwing the ball the way you would expect Aaron Rodgers to throw the ball. So he's definitely got stuff in the tank. Obviously, he's a little bit of a media magnet, so you kind of have to decide as a franchise, do you want to bring that to town or not? I'm not saying that as a pro or a con to him, that's just kind of the reality of the situation. But he's definitely got a season or two left in him, no doubt about it, as far as just physically. Stafford is not quite what he was 3 or 4 years ago from a arm talent standpoint, but it's still more than good enough to get the job done in the NFL. And mentally, he's extremely sharp. He knows what he's looking at. He knows how to play defense. Like, he is that post snap guy who can really get through progressions and recognize rotation. So it's Aaron Rodgers, guys who will recognize that stuff extremely well, and they don't necessarily need the pre-snap pressure on defense that we're talking about that a Russell Wilson, was kind of looking for in terms of his skill set. So either one of those guys, I think, would be very successful on a competitive team.
So both upgrades over Russell, I would imagine, in your mind.
Yeah, and I don't mean that to be rude towards Russell. He's obviously potentially a Hall of Fame quarterback in his own right. Just it's not his skill set. He's not supposed to, breaking down the Chiefs game, there's times when he's checking the ball down when he doesn't need to. There's no pressure on him, and the dude's getting whacked at the line of scrimmage. Other times he's holding on the ball for too long, but something was open. Like, he just didn't seem consistent or comfortable. It's almost like the media narrative is kind of in his head, where back when he was with the Seahawks, it was like, well, he's holding on to the ball for too long. The stack is a quarterback sack in his case. And so he's clean in the pocket, and he's throwing the ball to a check down who's got a defender 3 yards away from him, who's going to whack him by the time the ball gets there. And it's like he's kind of playing into that narrative a little bit and trying to jump off what the media has said. I don't think you necessarily have that problem with a Stafford or a Rodgers.
For sure. Hit me with a little bit of insight on this draft class. I know you watch a lot of college football quarterbacks. I mean, what are your thoughts? I'm seeing, guys like Ward and Sanders being, discussed in terms of rankings from anywhere, in like that 10 to 30 range, honestly. Where they're drafted, of course, is dependent on team need to a large degree. But talk to me about maybe this class in general. And I'm curious about your thoughts as well on Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, so it's not the deepest class, not a very top-heavy class. It kind of reminds me of years like, Kenny Pickett's class and E.J. Manuel's class, guys, where quarterbacks are going to go because team needs quarterbacks. But if you put these guys in some of the previous classes, like the 2021 class with the Trevor Lawrences, or last year's class with 6 quarterbacks, going to the first round, like, where do these guys rank? I don't think they're at the top of any of those classes the way they're considered the top of these two. I more recently watched some Shadur Sanders the other day. I was pleasantly surprised actually with his downfield arm talent, his accuracy, his ball placement, his athleticism. Like, he can play the game. With him, it's a little bit of the same conversation you had with Aaron Rodgers, which is he's going to be a media magnet, not necessarily his fault or not his fault, just that's the reality of the situation. And, that's a consideration when you're making a multi-million-dollar investment in someone. But I think his mental structure is pretty good. I think he does a good job processing what he's looking at. I wasn't necessarily high or low on him, but when I watched more film a couple of days ago, I've improved my opinion of him. And I think he's in the conversation with last year's 6. If we had 6 quarterbacks, from all the way back to Bo Nix, I think he's in that conversation with those 6 to be kind of a top 15 pick. I don't think he's in the conversation for 1 or 2. But I think he's definitely around. Cam Ward's a little bit harder. He's a guy who plays off schedule unnecessarily sometimes. He's very talented. He's a little bit in that Caleb Williams class to me, where he doesn't necessarily play within the context of the play. He kind of likes it when the play extends and he's able to let things overdevelop almost. Which is what Caleb Williams does. Is he doesn't throw the ball on schedule a lot. He's definitely more of an off schedule quarterback. I think some quarterbacks, especially nowadays with as much youth 7-on-7s, driving development as much as they do, a lot of quarterbacks are kind of unnecessarily off schedule. And I think Cam Ward kind of falls into that group. I'm not sure how well that would fit the Steelers. I think there's teams in the NFL that do well with that. Guys like Andy Reid are 100% okay with that. Kind of depends on who your staff is. I don't think that would be a Steelers approach if they're going to try to run the ball, build off of play action, have a more efficient passing game. I'm not sure that's necessarily the right fit, but if you find a guy you like, then I guess you got to take him. Going further down into the class, the guy that I love, and I kind of feel bad because now I middle of last season, I was really big on Jaxson Dart.
Yeah,
he was the guy that was
watched him.
Yeah,
Like
he's really high. Like he plays on schedule and off schedule. He's got, he's a B+ in all categories, which is a really good thing for a quarterback. He can do everything well enough to be successful. And I'm a believer that once you've met that minimum threshold to be successful at a skill set, additional talent at that skill set is kind of diminishing returns. He doesn't have many major holes in his game. The only knock on him that some people have is that he was Lane Kiffin's offense asking as much of him mentally as what'll get asked in the NFL. And, people will say both things like, he's Lane Kiffin's one of the best play callers, one of the most advanced college offense, or they say, well, he's too simple. It's like, well, if his offense is that much better than yours, that he can get mediocre quarterbacks to play exceptionally, maybe you should do what he does. But that part aside, Jaxson Dart, back in October, people asked me who's number one on my board. And now I feel bad because other people kind of found him, and he's not going to be a third or fourth round steal for someone now. He's probably going to get into the first round. But I think he would have been in that conversation last year as well as one of those 6 quarterbacks. I think he compares, similar to like a Bo Nix kind of player, where he's a B+ in all categories. I think that's a pretty fair comparison. You mentioned Jalen Milroe. I think Jalen Milroe, a very kind comparison for him would be Jalen Hurts, just in terms of the way that he plays the game. Aside from the Alabama connection, he's a guy who's played in big games, handles himself well, but needs more polish as a passer. And Jalen Hurts, make no doubt about it, when he came out of college, needed more polish as a passer. Him sitting that first year and developing a little bit has been very important for him to get to where he is now. Jalen Milroe needs that too. He's not particularly accurate down the field. He's not, the best true throw of the ball. Mechanically, he's definitely a force the ball through his motion guy. He's not as natural a thrower as you get out there. But if you have a team that has, say, an Aaron Rodgers and is willing to develop a Jalen Milroe for a year or two, the same as what the Eagles did with Hurts and sat him for a full season before letting him play, the same as Pat Mahomes did and sat for a full season, there's upside there. In part because it seems like his intangible qualities seem positive. He's got the leadership skills. He's got the work ethic. You don't see him getting in trouble off the field, to my knowledge. He's a guy that you seem like you can trust. So, he's got physical tools, the ability to be a more physical brand of runner from the quarterback position, which is a headache for defenses. When you got to count that number inside the box, that's a problem. There's a reason why the 2 best rushing teams in the NFL are teams that have mobile quarterbacks. It's not because the Ravens and Eagles went out and signed Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. Those 2 teams were the 2 best rushing teams in the NFL before that. It's because they had a quarterback that changes the numbers implications for defenses. And, that should hopefully open up opportunities on the outside for them as well. The fact that if you're going to play against the Eagles, you got to have an alley player to both sides to account for the Saquon bounce on one side and Jalen Hurts pulling on the other. Well, that gives you isolated matchups outside that pulls down into, more cover 3 looks where the extra safety's got to roll down, more aggressive forms of cover 4 where the alley player becomes a safety. Now you're isolated on corners. That's a huge issue for defenses when that quarterback can do that. So if you're willing to play that brand of football and you're not that scared about your quarterback getting knocked, then Jalen Milroe might be worth developing for you.
I echo those sentiments, man. I just watched Dart versus Georgia and Dart versus Florida from this past season because, until you obviously get into it a little more, these opinions take shape. But I felt the same way. He's not the fastest and he doesn't have the most zip. But I think those are 2 things that, folks would have said about Bo Nix too. And thinking, how would it translate, right, to the NFL? And I don't see like this insane ceiling, but I do see a guy who can contribute right away because and he's like Nix in the fact that he's a badass, right? Like this guy will play injured. This dude is, he came back hobbled on one leg, I think, against Florida, or maybe that was Georgia. But he's got the intangibles. He's a smart guy and made very accurate, a lot of good reads. So I agree with that. Jordan, you got anything else?
No, I think that Steeler Nation and our fan base are going to be happy to hear that. I know he's been one that's popping up on all these mocks. I think definitely take a shot. And I kind of like that, bringing back maybe Russell or, bringing in one of these free agents and kind of letting them blossom and then get ready and see what he can give. But no, just tell everyone what you have going on. I know you kind of touched on it in the beginning of the episode, but just what you have coming up next and where everyone can find you.
Yeah, it's easy to find me at a Drayson QB Classroom on Instagram. That's where most of our people tend to find us. We do we have an online classroom where both coaches and quarterbacks tend to go for some learning resources, breakdowns on how to get through plays and concepts and identify coverages. Our spring semester starts next week on our online classes for coaches and quarterbacks who want to learn about how to identify coverages and game plan and whatnot. And we'll also go through some NFL film and break down teams. Okay, why is Joe Burrow the best drop back passer in the NFL? Let's go figure that out and, learn how to read concepts that way. So, that's what we have going on. I'm up here in Connecticut, so we have a decent amount of quarterbacks who, come into our area from Connecticut, but being able to connect with people across the country with, how technology's grown has been a lot of fun too. So happy to chat to anyone who's interested in talking football.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate your time, and we'll leave on this note. Where do you see the Steelers for this 2025 season? Where do you kind of see them? As a contender, pretender, or kind of just like right around 500? And I know this is a way too early, but we always like to get people. We have a lot of local people on and beat writers here in Pittsburgh, but always just like to get, an outsider's perspective on it.
I would say they're definitely a contender. Anytime you have Mike Tomlin as your coach, who I don't think he's had a losing record yet, has he? I mean, he's putting you in position to win ball games, even with very mediocre teams. You can go through multiple years with Kenny Pickett playing mediocre football and averaging 4 or 5 yards an attempt, and you can still be a playoff team. Like, I think if you guys have a solid quarterback room going into the season, whether that means a Justin Fields or Russell Wilson with a second year of iteration on the offense, or if it means bringing in a polished veteran like a Stafford or Rodgers, I think you guys should be contenders.
Well, we like to hear that, and I know our fans will. Hey, man, it's been great talking to you. A lot of great insight. Keep doing what you're doing. We'll definitely have to do it again. Enjoy
Absolutely. Good to meet you guys.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, appreciate you, man.
Alex.
Take it easy, guys.
All right, so I was very embarrassed because I have a bare whiteboard back here, and he had a completely
filled
whiteboard. Of course, I mean, the guy's an absolute guru, and I have nothing behind me. So if you have 3 minutes, I want to have some fun really quickly. Are you ready?
All right.
We're gonna go from
the tush push.
We're gonna dumb it down because I am dumb compared to somebody like Alex, but he talked about so many concepts where I think it would be fun to look at it, what it seems like on paper in regard to what he was talking about. So stick with me here, all right?
Okay. Yeah, should I start playing the Jeopardy music?
No, can you see me?
Yeah, I could see it.
All right. How's my sound?
You're good.
My outfit is terrible, however. All right. So first and foremost, remember he talked about the mesh with Justin Fields and how struggle to read it. All right. Here's your mesh. Here's your five linemen. You got your tight end. You got a receiver flanked here. You got another receiver flanked here. Obviously, you got your quarterback and your running back, and this pen absolutely sucks. And what happens here is these guys are going to do some little curls across the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Tight end is going to run a seam route here. And then this guy is going to come up and run a comeback. So that is an absolute mess. Can you actually see it?
You can see it.
It looks pretty terrible. Anyway, so if there's a zone coverage here and these guys are sitting in zone, your corners and your linebackers, these two crossing routes are going to be terrible because you're going to have guys sitting right there. So it sounds like he said that Fields would all too often would just sit on these and wait for somebody to be open. And if they never get open, he's going to take a sack. He's
or he's going to throw the ball and they're going to get crushed.
It's predetermining where he's going to go. So that's worrisome when you have a guy like that who you feel like hasn't figured that out. If this defense is in zone, you got to hit your tight end right up the seam immediately, or you got to wait for your curl route to come back and sit down. Anyway, the last thing I'll show, just for fun, I don't want to show the Russell Wilson play because we all know what already happened. I'll just show you the Steelers' favorite play. You ready?
Mm-hmm. I like this. It's like interactive learning.
I'll do this one of these days. You can't see this. It's a halfback sweep.
Oh, man.
But
the crazy thing is someone, with that much insight and breaking it down, you kind of just let them talk. And it totally makes sense. I mean, everything that he said about Russell Wilson, and I'm a Russell Wilson guy, but having someone like an Aaron Rodgers, who I really don't, like I said, I think that he does have some left in the tank, but I just think it's the circus that comes along with it, which we got a little bit of that, with Russell Wilson. But inevitably, they have to figure something out. I really think that I honestly think you bring one of the two back, even though I'm not so high on Fields because they're familiar with the system. I hate to every year to just start over and, kind of, bring a new face in. I don't think that that's really the direction the Steelers should go. Personally, I think that they should bring back one of the two, but we'll see. And I definitely, Jaxson Dart, I really like that. And some of these guys, you want to get these guys that, can come and play right away. And I think that, taking a guy like that, just everything that you said and all his insight, I think that they should definitely pull the trigger if he's available.
I hear you, man. I'm just ready for the ball to drop. I'm kind of sick of it at this point. So
I know. All right. Well, hey, as always, we're going to be rocking and rolling. We'll see you guys next week. Bringing on the best of the best. Just really enjoyed doing this with you, talking X and O's. As always, this has been another great episode of the Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. Make sure you subscribe. Shane, you know what to do.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.